So you're in the market for a mansion, but your budget is limited. Very, very, very limited. Well, good news. There are mansions out there that could be yours for as little as $1, but a deal that seems too good to be true tends to come with a catch or consequence. Let's take a look at 10 mansions no one seems to want to buy at any price. 1. Former mayor's house in Georgian, Minnesota. Many of the entries on this list have had trouble selling because they're downright spooky, but this first house is not one of those haunted mansions. This one remains on the housing market for a much more earthly problem. The 4-bedroom mansion, formerly the home of the first female mayor of Georgian, Minnesota, is zoned incorrectly and needs to be moved. It has no parking and no hookup to the town's water and sewage system. And to make matters worse, while the outside looks lovely, the inside is more than a little out of style. That's how the house ended up with its unusual price tag. It's free. The current owner, the granddaughter or former mayor Gail Anderson, said in an interview that it's going to cost $50,000 to move it and $150,000 to fix it up. So I'm not giving away some hidden gem. No indeed. But free is still pretty cheap for a house of this size and historical interest, even if it does come with some fairly significant catches. 2. The S.K. Pierce Mansion. This beautiful Victorian home is located in Gardner, Massachusetts, in a tiny part of New England, yet it never seems to sell for market price. Why? Because it's considered one of the most haunted places in America. Built by wealthy businessman Sylvester Pierce in the late 1800s, this nearly 7,000 square foot mansion was built as a dream home for the furniture magnate, his wife, and son. Unfortunately, shortly after they moved in, his wife succumbed to a mysterious bacterial illness. Pierce remarried and had 2 other sons, but then passed away himself soon after in 1888. Over the years, his second wife too passed away, the family fortune was frittered away, and the 3 sons began to fight. The son who took control of the house turned it into a boarding house, and from there, rumors abound that a prostitute was strangled to death in the famous Red Bedroom, a Finnish immigrant burned to death in the master bedroom, some believe having spontaneously combusted, that a young child was drowned in the basement, and the list goes on. Residents and visitors to the house have reported cold air, foul smells, apparitions, voices, chanting, and objects being moved or even tossed across rooms. The home has been visited by TV shows including My Ghost Story, Ghost Adventure, and Ghost Hunters. So perhaps it's no surprise that the only people who wanted the old mansion were not, in fact, residents, but a group called Dark Carnival that has made the home open to the public. It's now a haunted mansion that contains a haunted house complete with actors and illusions, if you're brave enough to go inside. New Jersey's Aubrey Lewis house. Take a look at this Montclair, New Jersey home. Big and beautiful, right? Well, it was on the market for just $10, and no one bought it. Why? This house too came with a pretty big drawback. Not only did it need to be moved, but it couldn't be moved more than a quarter mile because of its historical significance. It was previously home to Aubrey Lewis, an all-American athlete and one of the first Black Americans to work for the FBI and to become an executive at a Fortune 100 company. 3 significant achievements individually, let alone altogether. So a prospective buyer would have needed both to want the house and to live in the neighborhood. Unfortunately, no one came forward who was willing to make the move happen, even after the developers who bought the lot offered $10,000 toward the cost of moving the beautiful old house. In the end, the town's Historic Preservation Commission lost out, and the historic mansion was demolished. No one wanted it, even for just $10. 4. Practically free homes in European ghost towns. If you're looking to live in a big house in a place with a shrinking population, you're in luck. Italy and England both have programs that'll sell you a home for €1 or £1 as long as you're willing to live at least 5 years in the tiny communities where the abandoned homes are based. These slightly more than $1 homes are, by and large, fixer-uppers in small towns with dwindling populations that their respective nations are hoping to revive, by luring national and international buyers to purchase the big, beautiful, but broken down buildings for very, very cheap. While some people have been tempted and have undertaken the work of fixing these houses up and moving in, there are still many more homes in towns across the United Kingdom and Italy that are standing empty and ready to be purchased. for less than the price of a cup of Starbucks coffee. While the idea sounds romantic, it is, in reality, a challenging project to undertake, and the requirement to continue living in the home for 5 years after the purchase has probably kept many who might be interested at bay. It's only fair to be nervous about committing to moving to a new small town long term. 5. The Ouerbacker Mansion in Kentucky. Another $1 house, this Kentucky mansion sold for $1 and then was given back to the city, then sold for just $1 again. This historic Kentucky mansion's problem isn't just that it's dilapidated, rumor has it that it's haunted. The spooky Romanesque style home was built in the late 1800s for a coffee merchant. It eventually became the offices for a tax business, then was taken over by the city because of, ironically enough, unpaid taxes. The beautiful old mansion was allowed to crumble as developers tried to fix it up and failed, and it gained a look fitting the ghostly rumors that surrounded it, like that of a little boy seen staring out the window. Today, however, it has reportedly been turned into apartments, but there were many years when no one wanted it, even for $1. 6. Tillamook Island Lighthouse. Another large abode that couldn't be sold to a normal homeowner at any price is the Tillamook Island Lighthouse of Oregon, and it came with its own islands. This abandoned lighthouse took years and years to find a buyer, and only ultimately was sold to someone who wanted to turn it into a columbarium, a building filled with funeral urns. Why was no one interested in purchasing a private island in Oregon? Well, the island's nickname is Terrible Tilly, and it has a history littered with tales of death and hauntings. It has been, historically, almost impossible to safely visit, and it's said that the Native Americans from the area long believed that the rocky island was haunted by evil spirits. The lighthouse was constructed in 1881 with the aim of preventing ships from crashing into the rock. Unfortunately, the lamp was not lit in time to save the Lupadia, a boat that crashed against the rock 2 weeks before the lighthouse was completed and which lost all 16 souls aboard. The columbarium was constructed there in the 1980s, but today has lost its license and is seeking buyers to aid with the cost of restoring it. It's hard to imagine paying any price, however, to own part of a rock so closely partnered with death itself. 7. Georgian revival homes for $1,000. What if I told you you could have the 7-bedroom, 5-bathroom home for just $1,000? Pretty sweet deal, right? The only catch is that the inside is a little bit of a fixer-upper, or in the words of the Huffington Post, the home will need extensive and costly work done to make it livable. A glowing review. How is it possible? These dilapidated houses, of which there are many, are massive old homes, once opulent mansions, in abandoned areas of Detroit. This Georgian revival home, for example, is about 4,200 square feet and has a whopping 69 windows. Sure, many of these homes need extensive repairs to their electrical and plumbing systems, and when you're done, you'll live in a largely abandoned part of Detroit, but you'll be living like you're Henry Ford, and in his old neighborhood at that. The houses are regularly auctioned off by Building Detroit with bidding starting at $1,000. The home prices are kept so low because the city is prioritizing the rebuilding and repopulating of Detroit over making big money on the sale of these massive old homes. Besides, you'll need that money to overhaul the insides because these mansions might be cheap to buy, but they are in rough shape. 8. The Hex House. Another house with a chilling past, the Raymeyer Hex House in Stewartstown, Pennsylvania, belonged to Nelson Raymeyer, a traditional healer known locally as a powwow doctor, meaning he practiced faith healing and witchcraft traditions brought over by Pennsylvania Dutch settlers from Germany. Raymeyer lived in the house until 1928, when a man named John H. Blymeyer, also a witch, who believed he had been hexed by Raymeyer, came to his house with 2 accomplices to demand the hex be undone. When Raymeyer refused, the 3 men beat him to death in his home. They then set the home on fire, but the house didn't burn, which locals took to be a further sign of Raymeyer's occult capabilities. The house still belongs to descendants of Nelson Raymeyer, and they briefly opened it to the public in 2007. However, they mysteriously stopped letting people in, and today, the house seems to be abandoned and is merely a stop on the town's annual haunted hayrides. What happened that made them suddenly shutter the house's doors and windows? We may never know, but we do know that no one seems to want to live in this house, even the people that own it. 9. North Carolina. Our next house is the William T. Smith House, an abandoned mansion in North Carolina. This 4,000 square foot house, built as a plantation around 1835, sits on 2 acres of land right next to a Civil War cemetery, which makes sense because the house and surrounding area were used as a field hospital during the American Civil War, specifically around the Battle of Ouerbacker. Perhaps the creepy combination of plantation and field hospital have kept buyers away, as it's currently listed at just $60,000 after being abandoned some time ago and has been listed on the market for quite some time. But there are upsides to buying this old, spooky mansion. You could get a historic preservation tax credit for fixing it up. Besides, who wouldn't want to live next to a cemetery? At least the neighbors are quiet, usually. 10. The Amityville Horror House. When it comes to spine-tingling homes, the site of the Amityville Horror has to be at the top of the list. The Long Island home where 5 people were murdered in 1974, and which has since regularly been the topic of scary books and movies, has historically had a hard time selling for market price. And it's no surprise, since visitors and residents have reported oozing walls, levitations, and demonic happenings in the home. Surprisingly, someone was willing to buy the house in 2017 for just $200,000 less than the original asking price. We'll have to wait and see whether or not they end up writing a book about the experience. And there you have it. These 10 properties were all sold, or not sold, well below what their value should have been, whether because they came with a logistical snafu, additional costs, or something much more sinister. What do you think? Would you live in a haunted house at a reduced price? Would you be willing to move to a ghost town in exchange for a cheap mansion? What could have happened that 50 Cent's mansion sold for $2 million when it was valued at $18 million? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel for more spine-chilling information like this.